When we think about the greatest migrations in human history, we often picture ancient journeys across continents. But what if I told you the single biggest human migration is happening right now? It's not across borders, but from the countryside into our cities. So let's dig into how our world is being fundamentally reshaped, one city at a time.
Right now, as we speak, we've already crossed a massive tipping point. For the first time in all of human history, more than half of us, that's over 4 billion people, are living in a city.
And believe it or not, this trend is just getting started. By 2050, that number is expected to jump to nearly 70%. To put that in perspective, that means we need to make room for another 2.5 billion people in our urban areas. The scale of this is just staggering.
So, what's really driving all this? In this first part, we're going to get into the powerful forces behind this planet-wide move and really define what we mean by urbanization. Okay, so the official term is urbanization, but it's kind of two things at once. On one hand, it's the actual process of cities growing bigger, but on the other, it's also a measurement. It's the percentage of a country's population living inside city limits. So it's both the action and the result.
So why the huge pull? Well, it really boils down to the search for a better life. Cities promise jobs and economic opportunities that you just can't find in rural areas. Plus, you get much better access to things like healthcare and education. This is all part of a much bigger story, especially in places like Asia, Africa, and Latin America, where whole countries are shifting from farming economies to industrial ones at an incredible speed. This kind of explosive growth is creating urban areas on a scale we've literally never seen before. They're so massive, we've actually had to invent new words just to describe them. Get ready, because we're entering the age of the urban giant.
Just look at this timeline for a second. Back in 1950, there were only 2 cities on the entire planet with more than 10 million people, New York and Tokyo. That's it. Today, there are more than 30 of them. And the new epicenters of this growth are almost all in the world's developing regions, where this shift is happening faster than ever. All right, so let's break down the lingo. First up, you've got your megacity. This is any city with over 10 million people. Think New York, Lagos, or Mumbai. They're massive economic hubs for their region. But then, you have the metacity. These are in a league of their own, with over 20 million people. We're talking about places like Tokyo, Delhi, and Shanghai. These giants don't just dominate a region, their cultural and economic influence is felt across the entire globe.
Now, as cities get bigger in population, they don't just get more crowded, they actually change their shape. They start to expand outward, spreading across the landscape in some pretty predictable ways.
Geographers have pretty much nailed this down to 3 key processes. It all starts with suburbanization, that classic move from the city center to the neighborhoods on the edge. When that growth happens way too fast and without a plan, you get urban sprawl. And finally, you see decentralization. This is a huge shift where jobs and services actually pack up and follow people out of the downtown core.
Let's focus on urban sprawl for a sec. You can think of this as growth on autopilot. It's what happens when a city just expands reactively, so fast that planning can't keep up. The result is often these sprawling, low-density housing tracts and road systems built out of pure necessity, not good design.
And then there's decentralization. This is what happens when the city's original heart, the central business district, just can't hold everything anymore. So what happens? The jobs, the shopping, the services, they all start moving outward, following the population and creating a bunch of smaller centers instead of just one big one.
All of this outward pushing and pulling has created entirely new kinds of communities. Seriously, they're not your traditional cities, but they're not quiet little suburbs either. There's something else entirely, thriving on the very edge of the modern metropolis.
First up, you've got the Edge City. A lot of these started out as suburbs, but they've grown up. They're now so self-sufficient with their own huge office parks, hotels, and malls that people who live there almost never need to go into the original central city for anything.
Next, we have the Boomberg. I like to call this one the accidental city. It's basically a suburb that grew so incredibly fast that it now has over 100,000 people. But here's the thing, it usually doesn't have a traditional downtown. It's more like a patchwork of different planned communities that all just sort of merge together.
And finally, if you keep driving out past the suburbs, you'll eventually hit the exurbs. These are communities built way out on former farmland. They offer that rural vibe for people who are still tied economically to the city. Making it work here relies on either a very long commute or, more and more, a really good internet connection.
Of course, this kind of crazy, unprecedented growth isn't all sunshine and roses. It creates some enormous challenges. As you're about to see, when you get this much density, you inevitably get a whole lot of tensity.
Yeah, this quote from our source material really nails it. The sheer scale and speed of all this growth puts a ton of pressure on, well, everything. From infrastructure to social harmony, it creates friction and strain at every single level.
And here are the major pressure points. The city's basic infrastructure, housing, water, sanitation, it all gets stretched to the absolute breaking point. The environmental cost is huge, with more pollution and priceless farmland getting paved over forever. And then there are the social costs, terrible traffic, and often growing inequality that can divide people living in the very same city.
So, all this brings us to what might be one of the most important questions of our time. This shift to an urban planet, it seems inevitable, but the kind of cities we build, that's a choice. As billions more people join us in urban centers, the great challenge isn't just figuring out where to put them. It's deciding what kind of future we actually want to build, for ourselves and for everyone who comes after us.